Welcome back to Red vs. Blue episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 20, Everything Old is New Again. Exactly 3 months after the season 1 finale, trying to contact Blue Command, a man in purple armor introduces himself as Medical Officer Frank Dufresne over the radio, stating he's reached Blood Gulch Outpost Alpha. All Frank got in response was a staticky voice of which all he could get out of was the word dude, so he asked it to repeat itself many times, finally suggesting to the voice that they increase their communication frequency to Echo Bravo. This must have worked, as the staticky voice becomes clear, revealing it as Vix, who greets Frank with multiple hellos, asks what's going on, and explains his static was due to just being in the elevator. Frank, surprised by the unprofessionalism, clarifies if this is Blue Command, which Vic confirms, nervously twitching and winking, making Frank even more weirded out, asking once again if a place like this really was Blue Command. Vic took offense to this, warning Frank to cut it out, reminding him he was the one who called in the first place. Frank tries to defend himself, about to mention how strange Vic was acting, but stops himself to avoid making Vic angrier, instead restating that he had arrived at Blood Gulch Outpost Alpha, asking who he was supposed to make contact with from the team. Vic checked his files, searching by alphabetical order, until he found Blood Gulch, informing Frank to make contact with Private Tucker and ask about their wounded guy. Frank then asked if there was anything else, to which Vic responded by almost reading a report that he wasn't supposed to, so he panicked, simply warning Frank to be careful. Frank, now somewhat concerned, simply responded, "Great," with Vic then rushing to end the conversation, stating politely but cooperatively that he hoped he had succeeded in providing good customer service like he was supposed to, and encouraging Frank to call back and say, "Dude, I've got some questions," if he had any, and hanging up. Frank then headed towards the Blue Base, searching for Tucker. Speaking of Blue Base, at some point in the 3-month-long time skip, Church was still possessing Lopez, essentially making his body his own, especially after having it spray-painted his regular cobalt armor color. As for what was happening currently at Blue Base, Tucker was trying to inform Church of a problem with Caboose, with Church bitterly responding that he wasn't their mother, so they shouldn't come to him to solve their bickering. Tucker rebuttals that Caboose was crazy and threatens him in a scary voice, which goes beyond bickering. Caboose denied the accusation, claiming Tucker was taking his words out of context, even when Tucker mentioned Caboose threatening to decapitate him and give Church's head as a birthday gift. Tucker questioned what context Caboose could possibly be talking about, with Church still just telling them to quit tattling on each other to him, believing they were competing for his attention. Church tried to explain, despite mentioning this many times already, that he didn't and would never like either of them, so the competition was useless. Church was then interrupted as Frank arrived, calling for the Blues' attention. Church tried to ignore Frank and continue his lecture, politely telling him to wait, but eventually let him speak when he called again, not before asking him who he was, though. While Frank introduced himself, Caboose threatened Tucker in that same scary voice he mentioned, which was also the same one as the one they were on the cliff right after Tex died. Tucker tried to notify Church, to no avail. Frank continued, questioning Church if he was Private Tucker. Church denied, introducing himself and explaining who Tucker actually was, also taking the time to introduce Caboose, angrily noting how he was calling himself O'Malley for some reason. Tucker greeted Frank with "Yo," while Caboose simply questioned why Church introduced him last. Tucker answered in Church's place, stating it was because Church hated him. Frank then addressed Tucker, informing him that he received his request for a medic. Caboose, confused, stated that the last time they called for a medic was 3 months ago, which was when Tex died, with Tucker sarcastically asking Frank if he crawled his way there. Frank defended that he came as fast as possible, asking where the patient was. Church bleakly responded that she was 6 feet underneath and 50 yards behind him, referring to the grave that had been made for Tex, which was also situated immediately next to a grave that had been made for Church's body. Frank awkwardly gave his condolences, with Church shrugging it off, replying, "It was tough, but what are you going to do?" Caboose further clarified that they didn't like Tex very much anyway, explaining she was mean. Frank's next question was who was in the grave beside Tex, with Church vaguely explaining he was. Frank simply responded, "Uh-huh," in disbelief, with Caboose attempting to recap what happened, explaining how Church was killed by a crazy tank and became a really mean ghost who took over Lopez, a Mexican robot's body, which they had spray-painted cobalt and turned off the Spanish setting, ending with how Church was essentially alive again at this point, having his own body. Tucker added how Church was technically killed by the idiot driving the tank to get a dog at Caboose, and explained how it took them 6 weeks to get Lopez's Spanish setting turned off, with Church reminding him it wasn't entirely turned off by saying, "Not entirely turned off, moron," in Spanish, leading an annoyed Tucker to suggest getting the Spanish dictionary. By the way, the episodes now also have subtitles for all of Lopez's Spanish. Frank, after taking all this in, simply clarified that no one was actually hurt, with Church confirming, adding how he was better than ever as he demonstrated how he could turn his ears off due to the robot body if Caboose and Tucker annoyed him too much. Caboose responded that he thought Church said they were glitching, having fallen for Church's lie, leading Church to briefly turn off his ears to avoid Caboose, annoyedly telling Caboose he couldn't hear him. Frank then stated he would be on his way if no one needed him, but not before checking them out, lifting up a weird machine he was holding in the process. Tucker worriedly questioned what checking them out meant, clarifying if he had to turn his head and cough. Frank assured him he was just meant checking vitals, leading Caboose to confidently claim he had better vitals than Tucker, admitting he had no idea what a vital was. Church's response to Frank's statement was focused on the part where he said he was leaving, questioning why Frank wasn't going to join their team. Frank explained that he was just ordered to help with techs and assist everyone in the canyon as needed. Church responded by bitterly sarcastically praising Frank's help with techs, adding that the best way he could help was by joining their team and helping them kill the Reds. This led Frank to clarify that both his orders and morals prohibited him from doing that, and explaining he was a conscientious objector, confusing the hell out of Tucker. Frank further clarified that that meant he was a pacifist, assuming no one would get that word confused, but Caboose questioned if that was the thing Baby sucked on, with Tucker worriedly incorrectly correcting him that that was a pedophile. Church, astounded, especially at Tucker's stupidity, annoyedly clarified that Caboose meant a pacifier. Tucker responded shamefully, realizing his disgusting mistake, clarifying he was thinking about something totally different. Church disappointedly sarcastically replied with how classy Tucker was, as Frank scanned the 3 vitals in an instant with his machine, assuring them they were all good, but he would come back and check in one more time before making his final exit from the canyon. He then asks where Red Base was, to Tucker's confusion, who asks why he needs to know if he can't go fight them. Frank reveals that since resources are low, he was assigned to both outposts to help whoever needs him from both teams. Church angrily complained how lame that was, but Frank ignored the complaints, stating he was just going to see if the Reds needed anything. Church, wanting to convince Frank to stay, tried warning him to put away his medical machine, claiming the Reds would shoot it out of his hand the second they saw it. Coincidentally, a bullet hits the machine immediately after that warning, leading Church to respond proudly, "See, just like that," before realizing the danger, shouting a warning for everyone to scatter. Meanwhile, on the Red side of the canyon, it's revealed that the shot did in fact come from the Reds, specifically Donut, who Sarge congratulates on the nice shot, with Donut thanking him. Simmons proceeds to shoot rapidly, shouting the infamous line, "Suck it, Blue!" Griff then jumps in the way of Simmons' view, excited by the fact that they pulled off a sneak attack, causing Simmons to complain, demanding Griff to stop blocking his view, calling him an idiot. Sarge then ordered his team to hike up their knickers, instructing them to move further towards the Blues and go get him.